As chefs, we all know recipes. We have them, we teach them, we hand them off to the team, and then we watch them maybe or maybe not use them. Maybe our sous chefs follow them or decide to improvise, maybe they don't. That's just the reality of the life that we live in the kitchen. But what I've had to learn the hard way on my own was that our understanding of recipes has to evolve as our roles and responsibilities evolve, just as the importance of those recipes evolves as well. What a recipe means to us as a cook is different than what it means to us as we climb that ladder. I think every chef that I've worked with would agree. Because the most important recipes, as I've come across as a director of culinary programming, isn't on a sheet, and it doesn't actually produce food, not directly. And that's the recipe for consistency. And that's exactly what I want to share with you today on this video. Consistency is one of those things everybody says that they want, and almost nobody really understands or is willing to go out of their way to engineer. It's often treated like a personality trait, like some kitchens have it and some don't. Like it totally depends on the team you inherited or the generation you're working with. What I can say is that the thing that has helped me find success is the attitude that I'm not going to leave anybody else responsible for the things that I actually have control over. And consistency is one of those things. Now, before I go any deeper on this, my name is Gerald Ford, and if we haven't met before, I'm a certified master chef with over 30 years in the hospitality industry, all focused on food service and leadership. Now, through my company, Legit Concepts, my focus has shifted, and it's with working and coaching executive culinary leadership to improve the guest experience and streamline the delivery of world-class food. Now, back to the video. It's my belief that consistency isn't a trait. It's not a feeling. It's not luck. It's an output, an end result. And like every output in the kitchen, it has a series of inputs that can predictably be applied to control an outcome. In short, it's a recipe. And I'm willing to bet that if you can see it that way too, your entire perspective on recipes evolves. Instead of relying on hope for change, you can put your effort into the inputs and change those end results. Now, a question I'd like you to hold in your mind as we go through all of this is, if this is a recipe for consistency, what are the ingredients, and am I actually specifying, controlling, and applying them in a way that's making a difference? So we're going to start with a formula. Consistency equals controlled variables times clear standards, simple systems, and feedback. And then all of that gets divided by the chaos that exists in your kitchen. On one end of the equation, you have your inputs, your method, your checks, and the thing that's working against all of it is on the right. We're going to walk through each one because most of the breakdown that I see and that I've experienced are due to missing and improperly handled ingredients, aka the left side of the equation. And just like in any recipe, I'm starting with the ingredient that carries the most weight, the one that's the largest percentage of total outcome. It's no different here. The first ingredient that I have to bring attention to is about controlling variables, or maybe better said, the variables that we need to control. This leads to far more failures than anything else. Solid 80%. Consistency is a very high level standard, and nobody on the team is going to understand anything about it until we consistently hold people to that standard. Now, before we can do that, there's a question that we all have to ask ourselves and answer honestly. And that's, have I actually set my team up to be consistent? The reality, those variables are not under control, then there's no amount of discipline that's going to produce a consistent output. It's not mystical, it's actually rather logical. So what does controlling variables look like at the executive level? Well, let's talk about the menu. We have control over the number of dishes and the number of specials that we can execute well. We have control over what the team is actually capable of producing. We have control over what changes and what shifts based on the staff or the team that's on. If we're looking at the variable of product, we have control over how many vendors that we have per staple item, how clearly defined those staple items are. Is the cut, the size, the brand, the pack size, the grind all clearly defined and locked in? If we're looking at the method, is there one clear agreed upon process for the dishes that we serve and the components that make up those plates? Or is there just a variety of versions that change depending on who's running the station or the sous chef that's in the kitchen because they prefer to do it that way? If we're talking about people, it's a matter of who's trained, Who's ready to actually run a station? Are they trained in such a way that everybody does it the same way? Is there a process in place to know? If every night brings about a different menu, a different vendor, a different cook, a different product, a different method, no habit, no discipline, no amount of effort is going to change any of it. That's why the first move towards consistency is identifying and looking into the variables and installing guide rails to shape decision making. Now, a quick pause before we get into the next ingredient. Now, if you're thinking that this makes perfect sense to you and you want to talk more specifically about your operation, then there's a link below the video and you can book a kitchen systems reset call with me directly. And we can take a look at your specific operation and put this into work for you. So now back to that next ingredient. Clear standard. The second key in this recipe is a clear, applicable standard. Once all the inputs are under control, the next piece is defining what right looks like. What does success look like? What does work done well look like? Not what you think, not what's in your head, what you can define and put on paper. Clearly enough that someone else can see it, that a manager can measure it, and then hold the team to it with or without you. See, I see that as defining the standard for both behavior and result. The behavior standard is defining what a proper debrief looks like, defining what a proper station handoff looks like, defining how information is supposed to move from one cook to the next. The result standards? It's defining what the plate is supposed to look like in the end. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Defining acceptable target ticket times and ranges for the peak of service. Defining what a clean station looks like. Defining what it even means to properly close a station. All of that clearly taken from our head and put onto paper. Huge hurdle here is moving this out of our heads, because if that's where the standard lives, that's where the problem's going to live, and that's where the solution is going to bottleneck. And then anytime somebody needs it, they're going to have to tap us on the shoulder and ask us for the result. As chefs, when the standard only exists in our heads, we're obviously the only ones that can enforce it and the only ones that can fix it. And since we're talking about this as a recipe, the only way to mise en place this ingredient is to write it down, 2, show it to the team or people who can give us feedback, 3, use it, 4, revisit it, and 5, tweak it. You've got to make this visible enough for everybody on the team to use it and stay consistent to it. Ingredient 3 is giving a simple system. Keep in mind, simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. I can honestly say we are all guilty of overcomplicating things that don't need to be. That truly pertains to designing systems that require everything to go right. Perfect scenarios are an absolute setup for failure. So a simple system isn't designed around perfection. It's not designed around ideals. A simple system has to be built on the reality. A good working system works on the worst days when everything is going wrong before requiring ideals. So now what that looks like in practice is a short checklist or a script when necessary. It's not necessarily a binder. It's not a 10-step process. It's the minimum viable version of what needs to happen so that it gets used, written clearly enough so that people can read it and run it. It has a clear trigger, a clear start, a clear end. It's a step-by-step execution of a process. Ingredient number 4, in the sub-item, the ability to deliver feedback. Because we have to be able to explain when things are missing the standard. We have to be able to talk to the team. And that requires us to have metrics, things that we can observe, things that we can measure, and things that we can address. If we set ourselves up with comparisons, as in dish sendbacks, tracked by station and by dish and by who the cook is, that gives us a clear, data-driven metric to provide feedback on. Not emotional, data-driven. Clear counts of meetings intended versus meetings held. Not complicated, just honest and consistently executed. This 4th ingredient is really the key to keep nudging people back in line and help them correct or identify if they're a wrong fit. The other side of that equation is what I like to call the chaos load. The villain of the story is the denominator. It's the thing that works against everything else that we're working on. Everything in the formula, controlled variables, clear standards, simple systems, and feedback, all have to be able to survive the chaos that lives in our environment. As I've gotten older, I've come to realize that chaos isn't random. It's actually highly consistent, and it comes from predictable patterns. And when we name those sources, when we name those patterns and we call them out, we can actually do a lot to minimize them. Now, you've heard me say that structure is the cure for chaos, so let me break down chaos into what I believe are the three main pieces that all together make up chaos. Product chaos, people chaos, and leadership chaos. The unknowns, if ignored, kind of things. The higher the total number of your chaos load, the harder it is to be consistent no matter how strong the other side of the equation is. So what is product chaos? Well, product chaos are variables in food. Think vendor swings, change in brands, cut sizes, quality from one delivery to the next, spec drift. All of it is impossible to manage with no standards and documented specifications, especially on the key most expensive items. It's also where prices tend to spike. It's pretty easy to recognize when product chaos is out of control, when the raw product looks different, handles different, shows up in different pack sizes, or if 86 is an inconsistent thing because, well, pack sizes change and case counts change as well. People chaos comes in two different forms. The first is our unwillingness to handle and deliver accountability. There's no clear consequences for being late, sloppy, or disrespectful. We have wishy-washy standards that almost always exist in our heads. Maybe they're poorly written on paper, but they're certainly not enforced in practice. Maybe some sous chefs enforce and some don't. That's why some are loved and some are hated. Some follow up, some don't. All of that is people chaos. The second are engagement gaps. People who don't see how their role connects to the bigger picture, don't engage, they're not interested in working, and all of those are resolvable. It's still chaos that we have to deal with. We can absolve a lot of that by investing in one-on-ones or sharing development paths, or even providing feedback that helps people understand where they are in relationship to a standard. A clear indicator that you're working with a high people chaos is the same names keep coming up in frustrated conversations. Those same people respond with, "Oh, I didn't know," or "You never trained me on that," even if you're confident that you addressed those things. Those are the same people that make us feel like we're only babysitting. And then finally, the leadership chaos. This one sucks. This is the one that is most uncomfortable to talk about because it's entirely in our control. It's usually because of a blind spot. I know for me it was for years. Leadership chaos comes from leading with emotion, overreacting, not dealing in data. And when something goes wrong, we explode. Often it leads to the standard shifting because of how good or bad we feel, how tired or not tired we are, how much attention or pressure we're dealing with. Leadership chaos comes from saying yes to everything and not standing up for the team or the system, being the only flex in a system, trying to absorb last-minute changes even though the team can't actually. It's pretty easy to identify when leadership chaos is the problem or is the highest when the team, "Chef's got it, don't worry about it." It's also pretty telling if the schedule is shaped entirely by whoever complains the most. When decisions come from how we feel about something or how much we don't want to deal with something, the tail's wagging the dog and we are creating leadership chaos. My goal with all of this is simple. Identify which side of the equation is causing you the most challenge and pain. Identify what type of chaos is the highest, or on the other side of the equation, what's going to make the biggest positive impact. And then use what we've talked about here today to work and reduce it. Because the better that we control the chaos load, the easier it is to make systems do their job. My nudge? Start with the chaos load. Now let's zoom all the way back out and look at this recipe as a whole. Controlled variables, clear standards, simple systems, and feedback all together set us up for consistency. The thing working against us is the mass of the chaos that we have in our operation, whether it's product, people, or leadership. Two sides of the equation, one major outcome: consistency. Every consistency problem in the kitchen is either missing an ingredient or it's got too many things working against it to be successful. If we can stop treating consistency like a cultural mystery and start treating it like it's a formula, a recipe that yields a predictable outcome, any consistency problem is easy enough to fix. It started with a single question: do you have the ingredients in place to execute the recipe properly? And then you can follow it up with, am I controlling the chaos that I should be in my product, in my people, or in my leadership? That should tell you where to focus first, especially if consistency is the goal, and I'm pretty sure it should be. Now, this is just how I approach the problem and apply a solution. Hopefully you have enough to take this and run with it. If you want some help though, this is exactly what I do and how I help executive chefs and culinary directors around the world. If you want my eyes on your operation, use the link below the video and let's walk through a kitchen system reset. On that call, we're going to look at your operation and we're going to identify which side of the equation is in balance and which is out, where the chaoses are coming from, and apply the recipe. And if it makes sense, I'll introduce you to a way that we can work together. Either way, you walk away with a 90-day map. Now, if you want to watch the full 90-day reset video, check that out on the screen right now. I'd appreciate it if you take a moment to like, share, and comment. If you haven't already, subscribe. And I want to thank you very much for spending your time with me. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I look forward to helping make a difference in the problems, the obstacles, and the challenges that are causing you chaos.